good afternoon, everyone. This is Mr. Gomez. I'm gonna see if I can turn on my camera. There you go. Good afternoon, Mr. Parks Board Committee, Mr. Molano. I see Mr. Ruiz, Mr. Khan, Mr. Morales, and Mr. Vasquez. Want to thank you all for being here. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. We haven't seen you since last year. I just wanted to say hi because I have a city council meeting going on at the same time right behind me here. So I'm trying to, this meeting from city council wasn't finished yesterday, so all the directors have to attend. But I just wanted to let you all know that Ms. Anita Stanley will be taking over the meeting. I'll be listening to it. We got some presentation for you from the planning department and from the environmental department regarding the trees that we have to take action today. And then any other concerns that you all might have that we can bring up in February. Hopefully February we can meet up. We can meet up again in the second Wednesday of the month, so we can from there on out. So just wanted to, ahorita Miss Anita or Miss Gloria Landin will take roll. So I think we have a quorum. And here's Mr. Martinez. Rafa Martinez, are you? Rafa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rafa. I was just telling the committee that I just came to, before we get started, I just want to thank you all for being here. I have a city council meeting going on right behind me as well. So Ms. Anita Stanley will be taking over the meeting. Okay. And thank you for being here. Hopefully next month we can meet at the same time and the second. So that we can move on. Okay. Thank you all for being here. And I'm gonna turn my back. I don't want to turn my back, but I got going on with the meeting over here. Anita will take over from here. Thank you all.
Thank you, JJ.
Good evening, all. This is Anita Stanley.
Anita,
sorry.
There you go.
Okay, we'd like to start by taking roll. Alfonso Poncho Ruiz.
Present.
Sergio Chavez. Victor Vasquez.
Present.
Richard Khan. I see him. Okay, Richard Khan. Okay.
He's present.
Hear you.
Audio.
Yeah, I see him. I see him on the participants. Okay. Rafael Martinez.
Present.
Monica Molano.
Here.
Orlando Navarro. Jerry Sepulveda. And Rodolfo Morales.
Present.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Shall we stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance? Or do I call the meeting to order? I call the meeting to order.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's stand for Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes.
I pledge allegiance. 1 second. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to approve the last minutes of October 21st?
I make a motion.
No, I second the motion.
Who made the motion? I'm sorry. Was it Pancho?
Mr. Martinez made the motion.
Was it Martinez? Okay.
Second by Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you.
Ruiz.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. All right. The go to action items, since we don't have any public comments or communications. Discussion with possible action regarding the Land Development Code, Chapter 24, Article 5, Section 24 to 83.9, to provide that money in lieu of trees will satisfy 50% of the total planting requirement, that funds received may be used for purpose of purchasing and installing landscaping and the planting of eligible trees in or near city parks or public right-of-ways, and that the cost per tree shall be determined by the Parks and Recreation Board.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start and do the presentation. My name is Jerry Pinzon. I'm the building official. Okay, and so I'd like to share my screen. So,
You want me to put it on here?
okay, can y'all see my screen?
It's
No.
black right now. Oh, there we go.
Okay. All right, so Section 24.83.9 of the existing land development code currently, okay, this is the existing code, currently allows for 30% of the total planning requirements, okay? And the sum of money equal to the cost of the tree required and their planning could be used on a special fund that has been, that is
Mute that one.
for city parks
Driving me crazy.
or public right of way. The cost of the trees is determined by the tree board on an annual basis, and the remaining 70% of the trees can be planted as required by this ordinance. That's the existing. What we're proposing, okay, is that, hold on. Not allowing me to move. Hold on, technical difficulties here.
While you're working on that, Mr. Pinzon, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So the new proposed change would allow for less trees to be planted, correct? Or would it allow for more trees to be planted?
I think the number of trees planted will be the same. The option now is that instead of only allowing for 30% to be planted elsewhere, okay, you can have up to 50%.
I see. So maybe somebody doesn't want to plant as many trees in a certain section, so those trees can go somewhere else. Maybe that's more, the environment is better, or there's more need for them.
And the issue here is that sometimes it is unfeasible to plant the trees in the location that required. And so the developer, builder, contractor will have the option to plant only 50% of those. And in that area, and use that other 50% total money, used it someplace else as we present it to the tree board, and the tree board can decide where.
Who decides that the planting is not feasible in that particular location? Is that a developer who just comes to you and says, listen, this isn't going to work with our landscaping? Or it's the tree board who says, now we realize this doesn't work?
It's really between the builder, developer presenting it to us here at building.
Okay, and do they have to justify their reasons for why it's not feasible in that area?
It could be various reasons. One, it could be the number of parking spaces. It could be the frontage road. They don't really have enough frontage road. It makes no sense to plant the trees in the middle of an industrial park. Okay, so
Okay.
these are the reasons why. Hold on. I don't know what's happening to my computer. All of a sudden, it doesn't allow me to move on.
You need to tell Mr. Ruiz to mute.
Okay.
Mr. Luis, can you please mute your computer? We're having some
Echo.
an echo.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
I'm trying. Did I do it or?
I have another question and concern. If it's not feasible, I understand, the whole issue of wanting to squeeze as much parking out of a space. But my concern is that maybe a developer would just build too much square footage on that land, and then they're trying to squeeze as many parking spaces at the detriment of the surrounding areas. How
Okay,
how
the
is
parking-
that, how is that stopped, or how is that prevented?
Okay. Parking requirements are set by the Land Development Code. Okay. Currently, there's some areas that in industrial air parks that, it's just basically all parking area for the process. And so the area in the front is where they would normally just have some landscaping. And because of the number of parking spaces required, the number of trees are much more than what they could have in the front.
So you're talking
I-
primarily about industrial areas. You're not talking about a retail development with a parking lot on McPherson or Del Mar.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
they're not gonna get that. No, this is strictly for industrial areas. And that's what the Land Development Code shows here in the next slide, but I can't get to it. I'm stuck in my computer.
Mr. Pinzon, pardon me, Madam Chair, this is Blasita Lopez over at Environmental Services. I have the, oh, there, we see it now. I was going to say, I prepared a presentation and I have the amendment in my presentation at the very front of it, if you need it. But it looks like, I know I can see the screen. Jerry, I can see your screen now. So it just needs, you need to make it full size.
Okay.
Jerry, can you?
I'm gonna ask. Yeah, I'm gonna get out.
Okay.
Can
do
you
want
not
me
go
to
to-
share?
Yeah, you can't go to your second page, Jerry?
One more question. This is Monica again. I see that the cost per tree is determined by the Parks and Recreation Board.
Correct.
Why would it be determined by the board and not just the free market? Going to a landscaper, ordering a tree, and it's $100.
Because there is a set requirement on the size of tree that we want. I mean, if you go that route, you can take a 15-foot tree, a 20-foot tree, a 12-foot tree, what have you. And so there are requirements, and of course that comes with a set cost to not only plant it, but also to prepare the tree for growth.
Thanks.
Jerry, are you prepared to do the second part of your presentation, sir? Placita, are you ready to start?
Excuse me. Yes, excuse me. I had my mic off and I started to talk. Yes, I have my presentation ready and I can go ahead and pull it up if you'd like and share.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go with you so we can continue on the
Okay.
topic, please.
Yes. I am. Let's see. Anita, do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Madam Chair, shall I proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Blasita Lopez again. I'm with the Environmental Services Department, representing my boss, John Porter. As you heard Mr. Gomez mention earlier, the directors are required to be in part 2 of the City Council meeting tonight that happens to be occurring as we speak. So with that, this is, I guess my presentation is a little bit more direct to what we're looking for the committee to make a decision on. And in this case, you've already heard, staff would like to make some recommendations to you based on our operational costs in these last couple of years. I put together some of those costs for you. And so I'm presenting more that side of the discussion this evening. But here is what the City Council approved on December 7th, where you see that the language has been struck through. That's the previous ordinance, and what's underlined are the new parts of the amendment to the ordinance that was already presented to the City Council in the last meeting of December 7th, 2020. And the intent mentioned by Council, as well as what I discussed with Mr. Porter, my boss, was that the idea was to have a tree fund. So to add a little bit to the discussion, I know that our chairperson, Ms. Molano, had some questions about sort of the reasoning behind this and what would occur. Hopefully this helps you and adds a little bit to that conversation. So this is an optional program that is aimed at industrial developments in order to give the Parks Department a regular source of funds to use towards irrigation and tree planting costs. The recent costs that I put together for you, that I'll show you here briefly, are listed here for you. These are some of the factors that we'd like for you to consider in the recommendation going forward. In previous experience, in addition, when we add to the canopy, the tree canopy, there's been a certain amount of time spent to identify the type of trees for a particular area. We've also obviously visited the site, planned out and laid out where and how the trees would be planted. We spend staff time sourcing and ordering the supplies, coordinating the delivery, and then obviously the actual execution. In my experience as the coordinator and the assistant director here for Keep Laredo Beautiful, we've had that in the context of an event, and in some cases, staff will just execute the planting as a part of their regular work tasks. And so that what I'm giving you is based on all of those operational experiences in the recent last couple of years. 2019 and 2020 costs are what you're going to be looking at. Part of what is an advantage or a benefit to what's being presented with this ordinance change or this ordinance amendment is that the Parks Tree Fund that is being proposed here and discussed, and once the revenue's in place, I believe Mrs. Molano referenced this earlier, it gives the park staff flexibility to be able to spend money and implement the trees in an area that benefits perhaps a residential area or an established park area. And so it does take some of what would go into that particular development, but it puts it in a place that perhaps is more relevant and useful to the residents. So here's an order of just a complete straight off of the quote that we received from the winning bidder. This is from LG Nursery and Landscaping. We just purchased these trees in December. They were delivered late December, actually right before Christmas. And we do want to have a caliber that's closer to the 2-inch size. That's our recommendation. And so we do pay the premium, if you will, to have a tree come in at that size. The only ones that are probably a little bit less are the crepe myrtles. But as you know, the crepe myrtle doesn't have the established shade canopy that some of these other species do. And then I also included the delivery charges here. So you can see that on average, they're about a little over the $200 mark. Other operational costs in recent history, mulch, topsoil, if we have to implement irrigation. And I took this off of a couple of different events that we did, one in 2019 and in 2020. The irrigation system that we've put in and the quotes that I've seen and the expenses that we've made that supports an average of about 20 larger shade trees. We're talking about the oak varieties and the sycamores. An irrigation system extended to cover and water about 20 trees cost us anywhere in the range of $1,400 to $2,000. Just the materials, not labor, included in that. And then if we don't have a water meter in place in the area where we're planning to have new trees planted, we also need to spend some money on bringing in an additional water meter to give us the coverage that we need for that particular area. So this brings us to our recommendation and the end of my slide presentation. And I do believe that Ms. Anita has some additional information to add. Thank you for your time. And I'm here for questions, if you have any for me.
Thank you, Blasita. As you all may know, Blasita is the Assistant Environmental Services Director, as well as the Keep Laredo Beautiful Coordinator, which she does a very good job at. Thank you very much, Blasita.
Thank you. Appreciate those kind words.
I would like to mention that we do have a comment from Mr. Khan that he agrees with Chairwoman Monica Molano that it should be for industrial areas only. It should be written into the code. Just wanted to mention, I believe that he is having difficulty with his either video or speaker, so he is doing it via chat room. From the presentations that we received or any questions, can we help answer any questions with regard to the item that is before you?
Just in regards to the money in lieu of trees that will satisfy 50% of the total planting requirement, funds received may be used for purpose of purchasing and installing landscaping. So as we're picking up these funds, is that account allowed to, if it, let's say for example, if it's a Parks Department account, are you allowed to use it for something that is outside the parks purview?
And the language in the proposed ordinance, in the ordinance, states it will be used in and around parks for landscaping as well, and throughout the city. So it's not earmarked specifically for a specific district. And so wherever the community needs a tree, this is where the funds would.
Anita, it's also for public right-of-way.
Excuse me, yes, you're right. Public right-of-way as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that answers my question. So thank you, Ms. Lopez, for your presentation.
Do we have any additional questions from our board?
I have a question, Ms. Stanley. So Mr. Can and I support it in the industrial areas, and I know you said you would take it to the board to let them know. Should we vote on it as a committee so that the board knows that the committee is united, or would that matter?
Yes, we would like some action taken from our board to voice your opinion and to express the direction that you feel we should take.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments? If not,
Just one briefly, Ms. Molano, if I may. Then how would it be determined on the basic of needs and who would make that determination? Would that be through environmental and the Keep Laredo Beautiful?
Placita?
Yes, Mr. Vasquez, I don't think I quite follow the question. If you would repeat it, please.
Who would make the determination on where needs of the planting of these trees would be? Where would that recommendation come from? Where the needs are?
I don't know that I have the answer to that question. I'm trying to read to see if it's perhaps in one of the sections of the amendment.
Because I know that Ms. Landin shared with us the information regarding the section, and reviewing it, I know that it shares on the and I know that Mr. Navarro's not here, but he was one that he raised concerns also on some of these.
Well, I can speak towards the parks, and we as a department identify different areas that do need trees based on the size, based on the amenities that exist currently in that particular park. And so determine when we're ready to actually plant the trees by determining the irrigation plan as well, because that's always something that has to go in first. And so when we identify areas that are in need of vegetation, trees, what have you, landscaping, then we do make the recommendation and we move forward. And these monies would enable us to have an ability to readily do that instead of waiting until we have funds. As Blasita Lopez explained, the cost of one tree is approximately $500 for a substantial tree. And so that gets, I'm not mistaken, Blasita, the one at North Central, we planted over 200 trees.
Correct, yes.
And so that was a large tree planting.
Sizable investment.
Exactly. And so if we have the ability to have some of the funding come from these areas, then it would enable us to more easily, if you will, create a park, create the shade, and provide the amenities that are needed in the parks, as well as Blasita mentioned in the right-of-ways and other landscaping areas. Because it's not only in the park, is that, right-of-ways leading into different population areas. So.
If I might add to that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to add that a few of our projects were formulated based on citizen requests in these last couple of years. So that's also something that's evaluated when the citizen request comes in. I want to say Wyoming, when we did the corridor planting along Wyoming Street in District 5 in 2019, if I remember correctly, that was based on a citizen request to the council member, and then the council member articulated that to staff, and then staff carried it out, and then where and how much we could put into that project based on some of the council member funds and the funds from both departments, which a lot of these projects over the last couple of years have definitely been a collaboration and cost sharing between the two departments.
Great. So if it's not in place, would I be able to make that request to add either the Parks Department make that recommendation, since we fall under the purview of the parks, but with the guidance of the Environmental Services Department? Is that something that would be feasible?
I think as we have worked in the past, it would be a collaborative effort. We work very well together, together we achieve a lot more. And so definitely feel it would be a collaborated effort. Let's
Okay,
not correct me if
and-
I'm wrong.
And then, in particular to Mr. Khan's request, along with Ms. Molano's, would that also require a motion to add the industrial areas to make that addition?
That's definitely something you can do. Not to exclude any areas, I would, if I read the comments correctly, it's something that they want to add into to make sure the
I think it's more to focus this for the industrial areas. So somebody on McPherson or Del Mar who's trying to get out of planting a tree, it's not available for them. It's really focused on the industrial areas.
That is correct.
I might add, Madam Chair, that if the motion does reference that point about the industrial areas, you would underscore the motion that council made as well, because the motion that was made at City Council on December 7th, I revisited the minutes not too long ago, and the motion or the discussion that led to the motion did reference the industrial areas, making
I think more so than just making it an option to the industrial areas, Mr. Can and I want it to just be focused in the industrial areas and not in
residential.
Right, not in residential, not in retail, not in places that people drive frequently.
Anita, quick question. Rafael Martinez here. Was there a reason why that wasn't added on there? As far as, is there a reason why they excluded industrial or that verbiage wasn't in there? Was there staff that to leave that out there intentionally, or that wasn't even thought of, I guess, when we were coming up with this proposal?
Let me get that information for you. I don't want to give you incorrect information, and I want to make sure we were not the authors of this ordinance. An accurate one.
Yeah, because I just feel that there's a reason why it wasn't added on there. I'm pretty sure whoever authored it thought about all the areas where they put the trees and stuff, and for some reason, they didn't specify for industrial area zoning.
Absolutely understood. Let me see if I can't get that response for you.
Mr. Can had another point about the trees. So the trees, the suggested trees, he said some of them don't work very well in Laredo. And I see that on each appendix it says, Texas native, can survive in 10 inches or less water per year. So is this list, are only things on this list able to be planted in Laredo? Or how were these trees chosen, these trees and shrubs chosen? What happens if someone wants to plant a tree that's on this list that doesn't grow well here?
I'm sorry, repeat your question. What? I want to make sure I understand.
So Mr. Can had said that, when he looked over the list, some of the trees and shrubs are not good for the Laredo area. And I see on the appendix list, each tree and shrub does have a little, asterisk or plus sign saying it's a Texas native or can survive with 10 inches or less water per year. I'm just wondering how these trees and shrubs were chosen. Is this an exhaustive list of what can be planted in Laredo? What if someone chooses to plant one of these trees that doesn't do well here and it dies soon after? Kind of just a little bit more about these trees and shrubs and how they were chosen
I apologize. I am not familiar with the rationale behind this. Is the Planning and Zoning Building Code, and it's an aspect of the building code. And so I'm not sure what rationale was used with regard to those trees. But please understand, when we are talking about this particular ordinance, we are talking about trees that are beneficial for the city, for our climate, for our environment, and that will do well. And so for purposes of this particular discussion on this ordinance, understand and please feel assured that what we are doing in our parks and in our areas are going to be beneficial and the best that we can for our city.
So even though on this list, some of these trees might not do well, parks wouldn't plant those trees that don't do well.
That is correct.
To choose.
That is correct, because we maintain them. And so it behooves us to ensure that we plant the best trees for the community, for our climate, as I said, the environment, and our maintenance. Maintenance is also another big aspect. Water and maintenance of any vegetation that we plant are very key components with regard to maintaining a park. And so, as I said, please understand that we are going to plant the best trees that we possibly can for our environment. And as I said, we maintain them, so it behooves us to do so.
Thank you.
Are we waiting on a response for something, or could we make a motion to vote on this?
I apologize. I have not yet received a response. My recommendation would be to mirror the council's direction and the language that they used when the ordinance was presented to them in December.
Correct. And maybe as a modification, maybe we could just put not to exclude any area.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If we do that, does that have to go back to council to re-verbiage? I guess what, this is a verbiage that council recommended for us, or I'm trying to clarify that because I guess there's a reason why they didn't add that into the verbiage.
Blasita, do you have a copy of the minutes?
I don't. I only listened to them today. But if you'll bear with me, John is in his office just down the hallway. So let me see if I can ask him that quick question about whether there's a reason that the industrial focus was not in the ordinance, written into the ordinance itself. Did I get that right, Mr. Martinez?
Yes, Blasita.
Okay, great. Bear with me. Let me see if I can tap him on the shoulder and get his attention real quick. I'll be right back.
Blasita, real quick, Mr. Can said he wants it to read only for industrial areas. So, I mean, I guess there's two questions. Why doesn't it have the focus, and why isn't it a hard line, like only?
Okay, I will ask him that question. Hopefully, bring back some insight for you. Okay, I'll be back.
And he's the one I just texted, but they're in a council meeting, so it explains why he hasn't responded back. She has a closer access point right now.
Now, Mr. Can mentioned in the chat, can the tree list be revised with a consult from a local horticulturalist or expert in the field? Is that something that would go to planning and zoning? Is that something that we would make a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am. This code was produced, the author was the Planning and Zoning Department. And so we are one small section of it, and as it relates to parks. And so this would definitely go to planning and zoning to modify any aspect of the current existing code as it stands.
All
It's
right,
not
I'm
part
sorry.
three, basically.
I'm back. And Mr. Porter was on a phone call, so I wasn't able to get an answer for us straight away. If I may, Madam Chair, I think the committee can make the recommendation. And it is a recommendation. And I did ask John earlier today about whether or not any of it would have to go back to council. And because council has already made a decision to change or amend the ordinance, and basically what we were looking for from the committee was that cost, the value in lieu of the tree. And so that's the main recommendation. I think you could make a motion, a two-part motion, to list the value that you agree upon, whatever that value may be, and the hard line language that it apply to industrial development. And that recommendation can come back to the directors, and the directors can move that along, move it up. That would be my recommendation to the committee at this time.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Well, just for the benefit, this is Rudy Morales for the record. I guess my position is I think it too should be focused just for the industrial area. But if we are going to approve something along the lines that council wants, it seems like maybe they've already made their decision on that end. Then I think maybe we should increase maybe the amount they have to pay in to encourage them to plant the trees. You know, I think it's more beneficial for the tree to be planted in some areas, is my position.
We would be doing that with this. We would be increasing it to, the trees are definitely getting planted. It's just, do we want them to have the option of taking those trees away from a retail, residential area, or we want to say, no, you can only take the trees away from an industrial area?
Okay.
I think, it sounds to me that we're all kind of in agreement on this. And I think Blasita's suggestion of a two-part motion makes sense. If someone wants to make the motion, it can't be me.
What is the recommended cost per tree? If someone could revisit that for me.
Approximately $500, and that's in total.
Okay.
Per tree.
Well, I still move to approve the value as recommended by staff for this ordinance.
I'll second Mr. Morales' motion.
Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Technical difficulties. Sorry about that.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a motion to approve the recommendation to increase the percentage from 30% to 50%. And is that the end of the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would say before we make a motion or vote on anything, I think we should fill in Mr. Navarro on what we discussed. So I know he just.
Actually, I was going to not vote on it, whatever it was, but.
Just out of courtesy.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like me to just run through the slides real quick?
Sure.
Or, okay. Good evening, Mr. Navarro.
Good evening.
Let me. So let me go to full screen here. This is very, very brief, very quickly. The City Council voted on an ordinance change that you do have before you, and you see the language mirrored in the agenda of tonight's item. The City Council approved this change to the Land Development Code, and it would allow a developer to be able to provide money in lieu of planting a tree. And so in this case, it's 50%, up to 50% of the total planting requirements. And then the cost per tree has been the majority of our discussion this evening. The request here that we're looking for from the committee is I'm presenting the data and the information on operational costs that we've seen the Parks Department and Environmental Services Department has seen over the last couple of years associated with our tree planting events and other tree planting that just happens normally behind the scenes as part of our everyday work. So here are some of the costs we would like for you to take into consideration. This is a purchase that we just made in December of this last year, just this last month. The cost per tree here, and most of the trees that came in were closer to the 2-inch caliper. Those cost $225 per, and then the smaller item, if you will, is a crepe myrtle that's at $115, and then there's delivery charges with every single one of our tree purchases. These are some of the other operational costs: the mulch, the topsoil, an irrigation system that supports on average of about 20 shade trees that are, I want to say, between 20 to 30 feet, maybe even up to 40 feet apart, has cost us in the past just the irrigation materials alone, not labor or any other associated installation labor-related charges, has been $1,400 to $2,000 for that amount or area, cost of area. And then if in some cases we do not have a water meter that's in place that can support that additional irrigation system, and so the average sized meter costs us about $3,300. And our recommendation here, and I think you may have come in right when the motion was being discussed and formulated, we would like $500 per tree to be the established rate that the developer would consider depending on their plan and everything that the building department would review in that particular development. And that's my that's my information. Mr. Pinzon from our building official is also on the call or
Yes, I
meeting.
saw his name. Richard, I mean, being that you are in the business, these numbers look okay? Is he there?
I believe Richard is speaking to us via the chat room.
Oh, okay. Well, it was just being that he's in the industry. So, no, I agree. I mean, prices do go up. And now in this situation here, it is cash, no letters of credit, right?
It's cash in lieu, correct.
Okay, so they can't do a letter of credit. Okay.
Not the way we operate, right?
Yeah. Okay. And the motion was to approve as presented?
The motion was going to be in two parts. The first part was going to be approving the $500 recommendation, cost of tree.
Okay.
And then the second part was going to be requiring that it take place in industrial areas. We had some concern that maybe there would be some retail developments that might not want to give up parking, or areas that are more populated in the city that might not want to give up parking to do landscaping. And we really wanted this focused in the industrial areas. Do we?
I don't, that shouldn't have any, the parking and the landscaping areas, they shouldn't cross paths. Shouldn't they, Mr. Pinzon?
Part of Mr. Pinson's presentation before he had technical difficulties included aspects of building requirements for a development, and parking lot was a consideration in there in the presentation.
Okay. Has everybody voted or we're waiting on the vote?
No, it's voted.
Okay.
No one's voted.
Okay.
So briefly, I was able to track down the minutes from the December 7th. It was requested by Council Martinez. It was moved by, brought up by Councilman Martinez, and then second by Mr. Mercurio Martinez. And then there was no one voting against. They all voted for as the, as it's listed to us.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we increase the tree fee to $500.
We have a motion.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor that hasn't been voted on.
Okay.
So,
You have a motion and a second.
I apologize. I don't remember who gave the motion. Was it
Mr. Morales?
We had a motion from Mr. Morales to accept the language that is recommended to us.
Mr. Vasquez.
Sorry, Victor. Okay, so we had a second, and then that is exactly when you action. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of accepting the language as recommended?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? We have one opposed, but Mr. Can, we're doing, you don't like the two-part motion idea? You wanted it to be one motion to not accept the language and send it back and say we think it should include industrial? So I see your mouth moving. Set.
There you go.
No. Okay, so you don't like that it's a standalone motion. You want two parts to it. Okay, is anybody?
Sure.
Okay, so we have voted on the one part. Would anybody like to make a two-part motion? Which I guess would override our one-part motion that we just agreed to. Or would anybody like to make a standalone motion?
I think whoever made the motion would have to retract their motion.
Do they? Or can we just motion again and it just
No,
the first one?
I think we would have to retract that motion.
I think that motion's already passed.
It has passed. It has. So now the question is anybody interested in making another motion, which would be a two-part motion like we discussed, or a standalone second-part motion regarding requiring or highly suggesting that this be used in industrial areas and not just be used strictly in industrial areas.
Madam Chair, I'm reaching for my Robert's Rules of Order little cheat sheets.
Okay.
So
Please.
Goes back to the question that if council wanted to specifically put that verbiage in there, they would have put it on there. So there's a reason why they didn't add only for industrial areas.
Well, we will vote on it if someone makes a motion, but we don't control council, of course. It would just
Exactly.
recommending
We can do a second part
we
motion.
discussed it.
Yeah,
and
we can put a
strongly
second
about
part
it.
motion that they can override us.
Of course, it's just letting them know that we've discussed it as a committee and we agree on it as a committee and we think that they should consider this.
Madam Chair, I make an additional motion. I motion that we make the recommendation that this ordinance be focused on just industrial areas.
Based on Robert's rules, you have to move to reconsider since the motion was already voted on.
Okay, right now we have a standalone motion to make a recommendation to council that they only allow this in industrial areas. So does that count as a standalone? Or it needs to be attached to the first motion?
Two separate motions.
One motion was already voted on.
Yes.
And so in order to modify that one, a motion needs to be made to reconsider the initial motion and it needs to be voted on.
By
Well,
the person that
is,
made the
do you
motion.
need to reconsider, or is the second motion allowed to stand on its own? And the second motion is to recommend to council that this only be used in industrial areas. So the question is, can that just industrial area focus be its own motion, or does it need to be part of the first motion?
Oh, I believe it can be its own motion, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, so
Anita and Gloria, do you concur?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I see Mr. Can has seconded the motion to recommend to council for industrial areas only, and it was Rudy who made
Correct.
that motion?
Correct.
Okay. So all those in favor of recommending to council that this is only for industrial areas, raise your hand.
Aye.
Is that,
Aye.
we're all, aye.
Okay. All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Martinez was opposed. Okay. Motion passes. Great. Let me come back to I think that's it. Is there anything for the next meeting that we need to discuss? Back up. There's no staff reports or items for next meeting? Okay, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
1 second, Ms. Milano, if I may, for next meeting. I know that on a yearly basis, we cover the amount of expenses that the Parks Department spent on the vandalism throughout the parks. So I know that we haven't covered it this year, and with that being that most of the kids, were at home because of the lockdown and the pandemic situation, I'd like to request maybe if possible by next board meeting, if you'd be able to present at least with the dollar amount figure of what is if we tend to make this request because that way we are able to educate the community that they need to be proactive when it comes to taking care of our parks.
Absolutely. We will have a presentation for you at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Sorry, I was muted. One last thing. So Mr. Can had brought up if the list can be revised with a local horticulture. Or this is something that he just is going to have to call planning and zoning and say, hey, I think, when is your board meeting?
Well, as mentioned, the Planning and Zoning Department is the author of that ordinance, and the Planning and Zoning Department would have to take that to the Planning and Zoning Department. So it could be made as a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Department to revisit I believe it's F1, the appendix F1, which is the trees.
Who would make that recommendation? Would we as a committee, could we, or is this something Mr. Can or an individual concerned citizen would make that recommendation?
Blasita, are you aware of that? Could it be the Parks and Recreation Board as a whole making the recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Department?
I don't see why it couldn't. I think it makes a whole lot of sense for it to come from the committee.
I don't know who
That's my
Merck's
2 cents.
appointee is, but Richard, if you talk to Merck's appointee at P&Z, that person could ask for it to be put on the agenda for discussion.
Well, I mean, can we make a motion? It's not listed as an action item, but can we make
It's not an item, maybe just a request.
or do we add it for the next meeting as an action item?
We can add it for the next meeting as an action item because
Okay.
it's not on the agenda, correct?
And the meeting's been adjourned too, so.
Not yet. How
Oh,
is
I thought it
it?
did. Rafa was walking away already.
Anything else? Real quick. 3, 2, 1.
You need to vote.
Oh,
Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
Adjourned. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Second.
All those who approve the motion. Okay. All those opposed? Great. Motion carries. All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.